Hey everybody, this episode is definitely not going to be for everyone, so I just want to warn you, if you get bummed out by political stuff and political rants, you might want to skip this one. But nonetheless, I feel compelled to do this. We're in very, very dire times here in the U.S., and I just wanted to. Originally, I was going to put this out on the Patreon Weekender, which is the members only stream that we have. But with that said, I think this is an important topic to get out there to the broader audiences, and this might spark some controversy. Some of you guys might unfollow me. No, that's cool. I just really feel compelled to speak out about all this stuff. But before we do that, I want to give the shout out to the rest of the horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse. I want to give my spiel and then get right into it. So starting things off every other Monday, we've got Brandon Legion's Horror Wolf 666. Up next on Tuesdays, we've got Into the Necrosphere, brought to you by Jackie Smith. On Wednesday, we've got Everything Went Black, which you're listening to right now, as well as Iblis Manifestations. Thursday, we've got the Necromaniacs Horror Podcast, as well as Day 1 of Soul Knox. Friday, you've got Spitball Media. Saturday is a day off, but Carl Hikara comes back on Sundays for Day 2 of Soul Knox. If you want to join the Patreon, by all means, hit us up. It's $1 a month just for bonus material, $5 a month for bonus material plus early access, and $25 a month for becoming a sponsor. For most of my life, I have eschewed politics. I felt like I had no place in my life. I was never really educated on any of these things. I didn't really care throughout the 90s and into the 2000s. I kind of felt like there were days that probably I had no idea who the president of the United States even was. That's a joke, of course, but that's how little it impacted my life. I never really took voting seriously. I never followed current events. None of that stuff mattered to me, really, for a number of reasons. Mostly because, I kind of existed under the radar for a lot of my life, where, just in this kind of lower echelon of, visibility in the world, being on the road a lot, kind of, existing, so, who am I to have these grandiose thoughts of politics or any kind of, social responsibility. I felt at odds with the entire world, for the most part, to be honest. I felt like completely separated from society, and that none of this stuff really had any impact on me, and I had no, real empathy for anybody, to be honest. Even up until a few years ago, I was more or less, just solipsistic in my point of view, or I exist alone, But over the last 10 years, there, at least in the United States, and I would say even globally, there's been this move towards fascism or extreme right-wing ideologies. And, in the United States, a country that has the image of being a democratic republic, is getting further and further away from those ideals, and people are not. They're going by vibes, I think, which is really part of the reason for the success of the MAGA movement. Look, during the pre-Trump era, all this political correctness has always been very annoying. People getting canceled, that sort of stuff. I'm not a far left guy either. I'm not a far right guy. I am a left-leaning centrist with, I would say, more of, I have some conservative ideas. Maybe they're more in the, financial economics sort of end. But my personal ideologies are definitely in line with the left. I think that people should be, left alone. Basically, you can do whatever you want. You can speak out. You can live your whatever lifestyle you want. The government shouldn't overreach into your life. That sort of thing. So, so that's my take on it. I believe in small government, which is kind of like a Republican idea. With that all said, the new Republican Party since 2015, 2016 is not a conservative movement. When I think of conservatives, I think of people who follow the Constitution. I think of small government. I think they want to give a lot of rights to the states. I think those are great ideas. I like that. So maybe I'm more of a libertarian. Maybe a left-leaning libertarian is probably really where I'm at. I think people should be left to their own devices. They should decide how they want to live their lives. They should decide what's important, and that sort of thing. The quote-unquote conservative movement now is a move towards fascism and authoritarianism, where the government is definitely overreaching into our lives. Let's use Roe versus Wade as an example. That's thinly veiled as a state's, solution, but it really isn't that. It's a complete submission to the Christian right, to religious fundamentalism. And you guys all know how I feel about Christianity. So that's, that goes right there as a complete opposition to my points of view, my ideas on religion, and just my ideas on freedom. That's a clear violation of my ideology. So, there's that. There's a crackdown on free speech. The right wing has, falsely claimed that they are champions of free speech, but I guess that only means if you agree with them. So that is a complete fascist move, in my opinion. So, not even in my opinion. That's a fascist move, straight up. I'm not even going to put this as an opinion. And then let's not even, we can get into just the kidnapping of people that by, Trump's Gestapo and that sort of stuff, which there's nothing constitutional about that. And just the Nazi-esque dehumanization of undocumented people in this country, where the right refers to them as illegals, which is a dehumanizing term. And now it makes it easy to look at them as the other, which Adolf Hitler and the Nazis incorporated that when they started, rounding up all the Jewish people and putting them in camps. Doesn't all this stuff seem very familiar to you when you think back on it? So anyway, I signed up for the No Kings rally in Newark, New Jersey. And, from my understanding, let's see now. I made some notes here. 8.1 million people worldwide participated in this event this one day on October 18th. Peaceful. There was no violence for the most. The only violence was really perpetrated by ICE, really, from what I've seen. And I know that the right wing is going to try to, they were leading up to it. Mike Johnson was saying the No Kings is going to be filled with Hamas sympathizers and Antifa and like that sort of thing. Hate America. It's quite the opposite. Let's actually they use Antifa as a name for an organization, like it's some kind of biker gang, which it really isn't. Let's go back. I've never been a fan of Antifa. I've been on the other side of things with them when it comes to black metal and black metal shows, and that's a whole other discussion. And it's a bunch of bored leftist types who really have nothing to rail against. So they're creating boogeymen within a music scene, and in their own way, clamping down on free speech because it doesn't align with their leftist ideology, which is let's call it for what it is. So that's kind of my take on Antifa. But now we actually have a fascist movement in this country, and being Antifa is not, it just means you're against fascism. You know, I mean, sure, of course. I mean, imagine there are people out there that, you know, have these like, you know, groups that they roll with and, you know, go and fuck shit up at, you know, black metal shows and whatever and intimidate people. But there's no, it's not like there's like it's not like the Klan or the Proud Boys or something like that where there's like a hierarchy of leadership and they all have, you know, whatever trip that they're on. It's just an ideology. You know, I mean, if you're against fascism, you're Antifa. You know, that's just the basic principles of it. And now you have the Trump administration trying to paint everyone who is not on board with MAGA as being a terrorist. You know, there's this big Department of Homeland Security move to, you know, deplatform and defund and, you know, essentially eliminate the opposition so that it's a uni party, like a single party in the United States. And that's not very democratic, if you ask me. You know, and I know that there's a 30% of this population in the U.S. that are going to go down with the ship with this MAGA movement. You know, and they're the ones really who are just like brainwashed into this death cult that, you know, Trump has created. And not even Trump. Let's get deeper into that idea. You know, he's too stupid to really have any kind of game plan. So he's really following the game plan of Stephen Miller and J.D. Vance and the Dark Enlightenment chaps, you know, like Peter Thiel, Curtis Yarvin, Nick Land, you know, who started writing essays about the Dark Enlightenment like 15 years ago. Because I've read those books. That's why I know about this stuff. And I understand their ideology, you know, and the ideology is that democracy is a failing way of doing business, a way of government. That it should be done, people should be governed in a CEO corporation way of operations. Like the president or whatever, the leader should act as a CEO. And, you know, corporations are essentially fascist groups. You know, the CEO through his board, you know, or however the company's set up, they execute their plan and everyone follows. So Curtis Yarvin, Peter Thiel, you know, Elon Musk, all these guys, that's their plan for everyone. They're going to install a CEO to run the United States, and we are going to be the worker bees who subsist. And that kind of aligns with Trump's his referral to a quote unquote golden age, which to me sounds very similar to the Gilded Age from the 1890s. And he's often cited 1890 as being when the American population was doing the best. Now, if you spend some time and, you know, get into your history, that's the time of you know, big business really blowing up in the United States. You know, you had the railroads, you had all these big industrialists with no regulation making millions of dollars. You know, they would be billionaires today with the inflation. That was also when the workers are being completely exploited, working, you know, 18-hour days, you know, no benefits, no overtime pay, none of that, living in these camps, you know, that sort of thing. You know, it's all, I mean, I'm sure that if Trump has his way, he would remove that from the history books. But if you spend some time researching that period of time, you will understand this, that it was a completely oligarchical movement that was going on in the United States. And this, he makes reference to this as being, this was the best that we were doing. And he wants to return to that, right? I don't want to return to that. I want to have benefits. I want to work, you know, technically an 8-hour work day. You know, I don't want people to be exploited. So that's kind of like the Gilded Age came to a head in around, I think, 1900 is when Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle, which is a book about child labor, you know, the horrible working conditions in factories. And that actually brought about reforms in the labor movement. So there you go. We're going full circle, you know, over 100 years ago. We want to go back to that and redo that whole period of time and just do this like cycle because people are too distracted to understand their own history. They're distracted with social media, podcasts like you're listening to right now. It's just it's easier to look at reality TV and TikTok and your stream, your feed on Instagram, than it is to actually understand what the hell is going on in this country. I invite everyone to check out the work of Upton Sinclair and do a little research on the Gilded Age before deciding how you want to live. And this also dovetails nicely with this mass deportation of immigrants, be them documented, undocumented, American citizens, whatever. If you're brown, they're going to collect you and send you out of this country, most likely to a country that you have no history with, or put you in a camp somewhere in Florida. That's how it is. So now this labor force that they were once part of is vacant. And who do you think is going to take that over? At a very reduced rate. I believe that our economy is being crashed so that no one has a job, and you're going to be forced to be working some minimum wage job picking blueberries in the field. That might be paranoid of me, but I really don't think so. I think that if you follow the line of thought of these guys, these dark enlightenment types, you will understand what their game plan is. And that is exactly what Project 2025 is. So, I might, hey, I'll take it if I'm paranoid. I hope I'm wrong, but that's how I see things from my point of observation. So, my report on No Kings this past Saturday, peaceful. No one was there to start trouble. The Newark rally was rather small. And I think that's primarily because of the proximity to New York City. The New York City, Manhattan, No Kings was huge, was massive. So there was a small group of people that got together at the Capitol building. They had speakers. It was all positive. It had nothing to do with beating up Trump supporters or anything like that. That's my idea of beating up Trump supporters and ICE. That's not the movement of No Kings idea. Towards the end of the rally, the speaker said that just want everyone to be aware that ICE is around the corner. All right, so you can feel this shadow just descend over everyone, thinking that these masked goons are gonna invade this, start busting heads. But that didn't happen. But what he did recommend is that when you walk back to the train or whatever, your car, whatever, that you should go in groups because these guys are gonna be looking to grab people. So I walked back to my car by myself. No one bothered me. Maybe because I'm white. I don't know. But it wasn't the Newark police. It was ICE that we had to watch out for. The Newark police were there to, shut down roads. If there was, it was, like I said, there was no need for any violence or any of that kind of thing. It was a very empowering sort of rally. Information was being exchanged. People were expressing themselves. We're in it, man. It's not even if it's happening now. This country is being taken over by fascists. So another thing to be aware of too is the behavior of the White House on the heels of the No Kings weekend and just the reprehensible levels of ignorance and depravity that the Trump administration is sinking to. The completely alienating point of view that they have. Back in the old days, when you were president of the United States, you were a president of the entire country, not the 30% of the people that supported you. There's more of us than them. That's all I'm trying to say. They might be making more noise, but at this stage, there's more of us than them. So he is choosing to quell this opposing ideology with disinformation, intimidation, violation of the Constitution, and the breaking of laws. Everyone has to be aware of that. And that's just my whole message and my whole point of view and my whole objective for doing this episode. It's not fun to listen to this stuff, but and by now I'm sure some of you probably tuned out, but that's cool. That's fine. I just needed to do this for myself. The Republicans are so keen to point out left-wing violence, but I got to be honest with you, I see most of it coming from the right wing. Of course, the Charlie Kirk murder happened on the 10th of September. It's still kind of unknown what the deal is with this shooter. I mean, he came from a right-wing family. He's a gun guy. Left people, Democrats aren't really keen on guns, obviously. But I think his trip is more like he just sunk into that 4chan, Andrew Tate, wormhole, that, sort of negative trip that people get into, young people, like especially in his age group. They fall into these wormholes of radicalization, and it's not even it's regardless of left or right. It's just a negative thing that is a result of the society that we live in and the pandemic, which is probably when people got sucked into all this stuff. However, on the same day, which the right has chosen to, really downplay this, on the same day that Kirk was murdered, there was the Evergreen High School shootings by Desmond Holley, which is a 16-year-old neo-Nazi, Trump supporter, the whole 9 yards. Right here in New Jersey, there was Maria Niotis and Isabella Salas were stalked and murdered by Vincent Battaloro, a MAGA Andrew Tate guy, some creep who stalked and murdered them. You don't really hear about that one. And the big contrast with the Kirk murder is that in Minnesota, Melissa Hortman and her husband or a dog were murdered by Vance Bolter. Which is a horrible thing. And I'm not saying honestly, before I get too deeply into this, political violence is a sign that your country is failing. It's not something that should be embraced by anybody. I don't support people going out murdering people. I think that the right wing are using the Kirk murder as a false flag, but more on that later. I want to give some time to the Hortman murders. When that happened, all the right did was ridicule them. You can look it up. Trump had the opportunity to reach out, and he didn't. He chose to politicize it. Despite the fact that the murderer was a right-wing MAGA guy. So it was an inequality in the way that both of these events were portrayed. With the Kirk murder, they're trying to make a holiday out of it. He's not an elected official. He's an influencer. All he did is sow negativity. And I'm going to say it. I think he was a horrible guy. I think that he is part of the problem in this country, Charlie Kirk. And I think that people need to reevaluate their thoughts on him. That does not support him being gunned down like he was. I don't support murder. I don't support assassination attempts like that. I just think that you need to be realistic about what this guy was actually saying and how he was impacting this country. Now let's talk about false flags. The Nazis used events like this to give a spiritual pillar to the movement. They refer to them as blood witnesses, Blutzigen. Probably the most famous or the one that people should know about, and it's very, very reminiscent of what happened with Charlie Kirk, is Horst Wessel. In 1930, he was killed during a brawl with communists. And Joseph Goebbels spun this whole thing into a mythology and used his death to justify attacks on communists. There's a lot of similarities between the Nazis and MAGA. Both they're death cults. They glorify sacrifice and they wallowed in this morbid fascination, with violence and, probably the most telling of this was the Erica Kirk exploitation of his death during her tearless eulogy. I mean, this whole thing was like a WWE event. And it was really just a way to rally the troops, I think, against the left. So, anyway, thanks for listening, whoever's left at this point. Yeah, I felt like it was a very powerful weekend. We'll see what happens here. We'll be back next week with some fun episodes. Everyone have a great week. Take care.
This is state control. This is state control. State control. State control. This is state control. Beat it up. The echoes goes. Get to business. Let him out. Get to this school. Let him out. State control, state control, this is state control. This is state control. Beat it up, the echoes stops. Got to business, let him out. Got to be school.